I will, with my talk, refer to the project, the current project on which I'm now working, or maybe I'm finishing working on it, and which is my book on the soul. It will appear hopefully next year, and it focuses on the reconsidering of this old philosophical concept, which is not actually initially even philosophical, which philosophy borrows from ancient religions and beliefs, and then through the centuries until the era of enlightenment tries to combine with the scientific worldviews. This concept of the soul is paradoxical because it stays in between religion and science, and philosophy tries to mediate until the point when the secularization of philosophy brings to vanishing this concept, and almost vanishing of this concept, which loses its initial maybe philosophical strength, and is mostly reduced to the psychological meanings of the soul on the one hand, and on the other abused with more contemporary individualistic connotations. So what people regularly mean when they say soul is something like a deeper inner self, or a true personality, or an inner world, whatever this would mean. What I'm trying to do in my project is to trace possibilities of the other soul that would be linked to the transition, to metamorphosis, to the immanent otherness of every self, of every experience, a living experience. And when I say psychopolitics of nature, I mainly refer to Plato. Plato, from whom philosophy of the soul maybe officially begins, but unofficially it doesn't begin anywhere, because since if we talk about Western philosophical tradition, since the pre-Socratic ancient atomism, soul was always already present, as picked up from the ancient beliefs, and even omnipresent, as Thales from Meletius was saying. There are souls everywhere, there are gods everywhere, and it's materialistic. The materialistic idea, the pre-Socratic materialistic idea of the soul, is in the same time inseparable from its theological groundings. So it's in between physics and metaphysics, physics and science of nature, between natural and divine, between these two regions, physics and metaphysics, natural science, theological, the region of spirit, which more or less corresponds to the position of the discipline which is now called philosophical anthropology, but in ancient Greek it was not called so. Philosophical anthropology, which is in between again the natural science, the biology, and the science of life, but also human, but also theology on the other hand, and social science and political science, indeed. So it has, it's a crossing point. It's a central concept of the discipline, which creates a crossing point between natural and political and religious. And so it's not about, it's not as much about psychology as about the passages between these areas and their intrinsic inseparability and so on. And this concept, such conception of the soul, is more dialectical, mostly comes from Plato, whose philosophy of the soul is multidimensional, but I can differentiate. Okay, I wrote something different, but it's okay. We can differentiate some basic threads in it. The first one is what I call psychopolitics. Psychopolitics. What is psychopolis? It's a Plato's ideal city presented in the Republic, where he emphasizes that there is a structural homology between the human psyche and the city, not as a city as we mean now, like Berlin, but a political community, like the city of citizens. So between the city as an aggregate, as a political community, and the citizen as a person, there is this homology, and both are structured in the same way. So city, within the city, says Plato, we can divide three classes. This is the class theory. This is the foundation of the class, what in Marx will become the theory of class division, class stratification. But in Marx there are two classes. In Plato there are three classes. The first class, producers and reproducers, those who produce and those who reproduce itself, the population, we ourselves, all other people who do stuff, and the majority of the population. Then the second class, in the second class are the gardeners, the militaries and the police, all those guys with weapons, and they are like dogs, says Plato. They are kind of angry, but at the same time, so they have this affection. They are spirited. They are aggressive. Whereas we producers we are not aggressive. We are erotic beings. We have desires. We have our appetitive. We have appetites and desires. We are desiring beings, and that's why we produce things like. And those are aggressive. They destroy, but they destroy for good because they listen to their masters. And their masters are the smartest one. Those who know how to organize the society as a whole, the political community, the city as a whole, and they are, says Plato, philosophers, the rulers of the state. So the producers grow, produce, reproduce plants. The gardeners, like dogs, animals, and the animals, they mediate between those, the rulers, and those us, the producers, and humans. So those who rule, the rulers, humans, and in the same way, the soul is structured according to Plato. So it has three parts. The one that desires, and it is located all these three parts. This is class theory of the soul, class stratification of the soul. It has three classes. The first class. And he says they are located within the body, not only in Republic, he also said in Timaeus, in the third part of Timaeus, which is super important. So the producers, the desiring part, is in the belly. And he makes this parallel between gender stratification in the house. He says there is this special area where women are located and separated from men in the house, so that our women's part of the house is a belly, and then in the chest there is a dog, there is an animal of the soul, which is spirited, which has not desires, but which has tumors, affections, and it's a different thing. So desires and affections are different things, and then so the spirit, so to say, and then comes the head, which is actually the first one, because it's round. It's like cosmos. It rotates, and as the thoughts rotate in our brain, repeatedly rotate around themselves. But this rotation, this analogy between the head, the human head, with the smartest part of the soul located in it, is already the round shape of a head, is already not from the Republic again, but from Timaeus, to which I refer now in order to indicate the second general thread of Plato's philosophy of the soul, which is his psychocosmic projection. It presented in this dialogue on cosmogenesis, where Plato explains, not Plato, but his protagonist, he explains that cosmos is a living being endowed with soul and intelligence. Endowed with living being, zoon, he says. So literally animal. There is a special remark about, and this remark also exists in Plato's, in the other Plato's text about the usage of the word zoon. It's not that he says that every zoon, every living being possesses soul. To possess a soul is to be a living being, an animal. But in Plato, this translates as animal. So in this animality, I know that Michael Marder has a criticism of zoocentrism in the philosophy of the soul. So now I'm talking about this zoocentrism. I'm trying to find like an emancipatory, positive ways of speaking about this zoon, this living being. So Plato's cosmos is an animal, and this animal is a special one because it's like the most general animal of all. It comprises all other living things and non-living things within itself. Therefore, it has a perfect shape. It's a spheric animal. It's a perfectly round animal. You know this meme about spheric animals, so it's a spheric animal. And this animal doesn't have, this is a body which doesn't have organs because it doesn't have any other to address. Because everything is within, everything is immanent. It doesn't need a mouth to speak to someone or legs to go somewhere because everywhere is always already here, and so on. Hence, it doesn't need organs, this animal. So what it basically presents, this image, is nothing other than a self-sustainable ecosystem, which Plato describes using the term autarkes, the autarky of cosmos. This cosmic animal, then Sloterdijk, who has a sharp criticism of Plato's, what he calls Plato's absolute ecology, points that this is a sort of a paradoxical animal without an environment. My point, that was my first idea too when I was reading Plato. I thought, okay, how an animal can exist without an environment? Even if it's the biggest cosmic animal, there should be an environment. This is a very, very important question. And there is a fragment in Timaeus where Timaeus describes how a world soul, the so-called cosmic soul, the soul of the world, appears. There is a demiurge, the God creator, who first creates the body of the universe. This same animal, the cosmic animal. But then he puts inside this body a soul. And then he stretches this soul throughout the whole body of the universe, and then also enrolls the universe with this soul from the outside. So basically, this soul of the animal, the cosmic animal, the soul with which the cosmic animal body perfectly coincides, is at the same time its immanent otherness, its soul, environment as soul. By the end of my work, so these are 2 points in Plato, then I tackle upon, I engage in a dialogue with quite a few authors like Aristotle and Avicenna, La Métrie, and also Max Scheler, who also, and in all these authors, the same structure repeats of differentiating between the 3 kinds of soul: the plant, the animal, and the human. And then these 3 partition correlates to another one: the body, the soul, and the spirit, or mind. So in Greek philosophy, it's rather mind, nous, and then, roughly after Hegel, it becomes Geist. So mind is replaced with the more general concept of Geist, more historically oriented. There is more a historical meaning of. And in Scheler, so there are a lot of similarities, but at the same time, a radical difference is there. Scheller's definition of the soul is, he's not talking about the soul directly, he's talking about Scheler is like 20 centuries, so there are 25 centuries roughly between Plato and Scheler, and they still speak about the same 3 partition: plant, animal, human, body, soul, Geist, or mind. But something is lost in this transition from mind to Geist, and this transition from body to spirit, which goes through the soul, mediated by the soul. Something is lost in transition, namely, my argument is, let me first remind you what Scheler says about it. He says that mankind, humankind, in his great work, The Place of Man in the Cosmos, humankind is different from all other animals and plants in that it is his being, in that he is a person. He uses this term person, and the person is not the one who possesses soul. Soul is one of this biopsychic, is a part of this biopsychic complex which develops from plant to the human. This is an evolutionary, this is biology. Soul is about life and life forms that develop from lower to higher levels and so on, but Geist is a different thing. A person refers to Geist, not to life, not to body. And it is akin to this domain of spirit. And in this, it is non-environmental. So Scheller makes a difference between Welt and Umwelt. Umwelt, the term Umwelt, environment, comes from Jakob von Exkull, who described the perceptual worlds of different animals with such compassion and empathy and love that I cannot really understand how people like Scheller or Heidegger can make from the Exkull's concept of the Umwelt as a really like a soulful perspective on the world given to each singular living being can be transformed into something so anthropocentric and repressive and become the basis of anthropocentric claims like human being is the only one who has this direct access to spirit. This is this is a gap. There is a certain gap that Scheller indicates in his writing. The initial point of a coincidence between the world, the universe, as the body of the world, and its environment as its soul, disappears. In Scheller's anthropology in the 20th century, and this disappearing is, from my point of view, is very symptomatic because something happens with this, with the course of time, something that Marx would call a metabolical rift. You know this term of Marxian ecology. The breakage in the planetary metabolism, which Marx relate to the development of the capitalist modes of production, or like in a more mystical, esoteric philosophy, contemporary, we can think about Nick Land's concept of geotrauma, where trauma, trauma is discussed not in a sense that Freud or other psychoanalysts would implement it like our personal psychological trauma, but the trauma that happens to the geological nature itself, the earth itself, that lives through. But in comparison to Marx, in this recent, more esoteric tradition, there is no connection between geotrauma and real social economical processes, but still they find a nerve, you know, they find a nerve, this this certain, it is as if we would like to speak about another coherent proper philosophical anthropology with the soul still mediating between the body and the spiritual life of the world, but make it less anthropocentric, make it more oriented towards environment and so on and so forth. But something radically doesn't work there, as if the soul was broken together with these biospheric processes that are in trouble. So my idea is, after all, I touch upon quite several aspects of it. It's huge, but I have one more point to mention with this regards. With regards of this tripartition of the soul, that can be a point of from which a certain emancipatory idea may be developed. This point is that even all those old metaphysical thinkers who were speaking from the position of producing this strict hierarchies and taxonomic, like referring to taxonomic differences and so on, they indicate that in every human being there is an animal and there is a plant within. We already have them. We are already animals and plants. Thus, Lametri, for example, is saying that human being is a plant, but the animal is a plant too, but it's a plant that moves, that walks around, and human is a plant that moves around and thinks, and so on. So they all have this feeling of the affinity of different levels of life, forms of life, but the point is not even that. But the point is that all those forms of life must be considered humans as well. And then the domain of spirit, which at the current state of analysis is presented as something inimical, something rather hostile to life, to nature. The domain of spirit would overcome itself in the direction of other humans, like other plants, like us, other animals, other various forms of life. This is a brief description of this project. Now you can see where I move. Now you can ask me some questions, and maybe we continue this conversation.
Thank you, Eval Tanasov. You know, I teach Plato every fall, so it's very up to speed for me. I have two questions. One is methodological or hermeneutic, and the other is, well, I guess the bottom line. So let me start with the latter. What is at stake in recognizing that we are partly plants, or plants plus, or thinking reeds, as Pascal put it, right? That there is less of a rift between us and the rest of the organic or an inorganic world. I'm wondering, what do we gain from such a realization, which I take it is partly what you want us to think about. And the methodological or hermeneutic point is, you talked a lot about Plato, but at some point you checked yourself and said, well, not Plato, but his protagonist. So I'm wondering, okay, Plato doesn't speak, right? He only has characters speak. So to say that Plato says X or Y is like saying, well, Shakespeare says X or Y when Hamlet speaks, or something like that. And if Plato doesn't speak, isn't that already a huge hermeneutic rift that we need to bridge? And what do we do with that gap between author and character? And that's especially significant in the city-soul analogy. I was just close reading that with a student yesterday, and going word by word, you all of a sudden realize how hypothetical, how on a sand and insecure foundation the whole analogy is built. It's meant to be a huge question mark. And for me, that's the emancipatory potential of Plato's work, right? To realize that and actually to liberate our thinking. I guess that's a comment. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Wonderful question. I will begin from the second, maybe, because I think you already gave an answer at the end of your question, with which I totally agree. I appreciate the polyphonic character of Plato's dialogues. They are voices. And they are voices also of those who didn't really speak that, like Socrates never said that, or Timaeus might never said that, never give this theory of the universe. But it's a fiction. It's a phantasmagory full of invented myths. Also, sometimes a certain theory or a certain concept is presented as rumors or some stories or legends, as people say, as we all know from the legend, so the source of the origin of speech is unclear, and in this sense, it's somehow detached from real personalities, cannot be really appropriated, and it gives room for development, for reflection, for this. I really love this form. Yes. So when I say Plato speaks, I do not really mean to be truly faithful to the historical matter-of-factness. I rather take the rules of the game he suggests, and I play the game. So I say, oh, this is speaking this, and Socrates, okay. It's a play. It's a fiction. It's art. The other question is also very important. What's the point of stressing our affinity with the other forms of life? It's as I said, I see two developments here. One is saying that we are animals, we are plants, which is more obvious, right? We are, well, apparently we are animals, but also plants. We grow, we eat, we reproduce, we have different physical appearances, but what is interesting in this obvious, commonsensical idea is that it gives us a perspective. Say, as a dog, I understand what is to have what does it mean to have a tail, or as a bird, I know how important it is to fly. I cannot do that, so my bird inside is limited in its possibilities, but it strives towards something. That's how in general, I see animality, like striving towards a realization of its bodily potentials and of its also soul potentials in a way. I take soul. I say soul. I know this is such an old-fashioned word, but in this sense, why not? Anxiety is also good for thinking, right? Thank you, Artemi. The other direction is saying that other beings are human. This is less obvious, right? Because a biologist or a natural scientist will immediately tell you, when you name your plant, when you talk to your spider, you say, "Hi, Freddy, how are you today?" And your scientific friend would say, "How can you anthropomorphize animals? If we recognize that our comrade plant is human too, then we have, even in a matter of fiction, in a Platonic way somehow, even if it's a performative, but we refer to her as a person, and you say, oh, my dear little bird, you communicate, which means you transgress your limits, you develop, you grow, you grow, you fly towards your bird, you grow towards your plant, who proves to be super receptible to your move towards them. It's a communication, but it's a way of creating solidarity with the non-human things, which is super important, without which we would never overcome we would never overcome it anyways, our contemporary apocalyptic, but yeah, at least something.
Yeah, that was an impressive historiography of the soul from Plato to Schiller. I would add Latour and Lovelock with his idea of Gaia. And I think it's kind of interesting because it's not just humanizing the universe, but also giving the universe a particular gender, imagining the universe as female. And I'm actually increasingly, I teach this stuff, and I am increasingly critical to this trick, because I think that really there is no reason to ascribe gender to the universe, because the universe is singular. So what would she do with her gender? So it's better to imagine it as asexual, not as a masculine, but as asexual. But there is a kind of interesting cultural or philosophical motivation for this kind of representation of the universe as female, which would be a subject of interesting criticism, I think.
Thank you. And I think Michael, right? Yeah, I had a question.
Yes, just very quickly, thank you, Oksana, for this overview. I wanted to very briefly bring Aristotle to the table, because he obviously seems to rehash the kinds of soul in Plato, but there is a very important difference. With Plato, we can think about psyche, or the soul, as a kind of vitality. So it's very easy to differentiate and count. There are three kinds of vitality. Aristotle seems to do the same thing, except that he says that to threptikon, or what is translated as the vegetal soul, is generic. So all other souls are only in existence because they can share in that one. And we have just been talking about the generic political form, which is democracy, right? So I wonder if you, in your psychopolitical approach, would put those two things together, and would maybe then we would move beyond the class theory of the soul to something much more inherently disordered, so that the constituent part of the soul, let's say the vegetal one, or the generic regime, which is democratic, completely undoes, traverses, and confuses all the other clearly differentiated classes of types of vitality, types of political regime.
Hi, I'm Michelle. I really liked your talk. And I guess I have one question where I'm stuck with Plato, and maybe precisely in comparison to Aristotle. It seems important that there are distinctions between the people, and that there are distinctions between these three parts of the soul. And precisely these distinctions give rise to the way that these three constituent political parties or three constituent psychological parties relate to each other, right? So I guess I wonder why, in thinking about this question about how we humans fit into our environment, is it important that we are like something else, or that plants are like us in order to relate to them? Why is it not important, like Plato, to precisely keep that distinction rather than to say plants are human-like in some way for us to relate to them?
I will begin with from Alexander's comment about the Lovelock and Latour's, but also Isabel Stenger's and Donna Haraway's references to Gaia, who was basically a goddess. This line of thought can be inscribed within the tradition of thinking of the world soul. Apparently it's world soul. Also Vernadsky's biosphere, with the reference to which and noosphere, I began today in the morning. Plato's concept of the world soul has an interesting then development through the Neoplatonic doctrines, through the Gnostic and hermeneutic tradition. In Hermes Trismegistus, we have this world animal that later, so then there are some esoteric as well as exoteric and philosophical interpretations of the world soul. Finally, Schelling's idea that probably, and Schelling's world soul actually, I think that it's there where we can first really think about it as gendered, because in the previous tradition it's not that clear, because universe is alone, is one, as you said. In Schelling it's also one, but he, Schelling in the world soul, and also in his other writings, such as Investigation on the Nature of Human Freedom, speaks about the unconscious nature that gives birth to all other things, including God himself. She produces. It's this natality, as Michael was mentioning, natality rather than mortality, becomes the principle of the world soul, right? And then I do not actually. I emphasize that there is in Plato already. There is an excursus in feminist epistemology, namely in the second part of Timaeus. There is a sort of psychoanalysis where he talks about the receptacle, the beginning of all things, which is the mother of all things. The receptacle. Okay, first part of Timaeus is the world soul. The second part of Timaeus is something that existed before the very beginning of the world, before the elements appeared, before the very beginning of elements. And this is hora. This is neither a space nor really matter. Something like this. Negative force or tension that at the same time gives birth to all things. And this is like in every psychoanalysis, this is the mother, the receptacle, the uterus of the world. Yeah. But otherwise, I didn't think much about the gender difference. But I was thinking about the universe and the multiverse, and here is another moment when we say that the animal or the plant perspective is important. I will put this together with Michael's comment and question on Aristotle, according to whom soul is an entelechia of a living or potentially living body. Or otherwise, to put it otherwise, soul is a form of life. What this would mean? Soul is an embodiment, it's a bodily perspective. Form of life that you cannot have a general form of life. You always have a concrete form. So life is a certain form. If you are a rabbit, you are a rabbit. You have these ears like this. You hear everything. And if you are a spider, you have so many. You have 6 legs. Amazing. You can just climb and on the wall, and so on. You can do if you are a fish. You can imagine. You can swim or breathe in water. So, form of life. And it's always singular, particular. And they are multiple. They are multiple, these forms of life. This, this point is important, and that it gives you an idea that the being of an animal, the animal life, and according to Plato, plants are animals as well. So he mentioned that they are also living beings. Yeah, environment is principle. So ensouled being is being within an environment. It's an environmental being. And in this sense, every animal, or including plants and other humans, are cosmic. Every animal is cosmic. Every animal is this Plato's zone in its own environment, living like an excuse, like an animal in excuse environment, living, enjoying its every sensual fragment. And these perspectives can only be multiple. So it's not a universe, it's a multiverse then. If we combine the idea of this cosmic animal with something like a perspectivism in the sense of, like, I don't know, contemporary anthropologists like Eduardo Viveiros de Castro suggest perspectivism, the indigent perspectivism, then we have this multiplicity of perspectives.